Billionaire called her just a maid. Minutes later, he bought grand ballroom of the Royal Diamond Hotel was filled with the richest people in the country. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. Men in $1,000 suits laughed loudly, while women in designer gowns clinked glasses of champagne that cost more than most people earned in a month. This was the annual Business Excellence Awards, the most prestigious night for billionaires, CEOs, and the powerful elite. And in the middle of it all stood Victor Ashford, the 58-year-old real estate billionaire whose face was on the cover of every business magazine. His gray hair was slicked back perfectly, his gold watch glittered under the lights, and his voice echoed through the room like he owned not just the building, but every person inside it. Because in his mind, he did. More champagne. Victor snapped his fingers without even looking at the server. He was busy telling a story to the group of businessmen around him, all of them laughing at his every word like trained puppets. That's when he noticed something on the floor near his polished Italian shoes, a small stain on the marble, perhaps a drop of spilled wine. His face twisted with disgust. "You there," he shouted, pointing at an older woman in a gray uniform standing near the wall. She was one of the hotel's cleaning staff, holding a mop and bucket. Her name tag read Maria. She was around 55 years old, with silver streaks in her black hair tied in a simple bun, and deep brown eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. Her hands were rough from years of hard work, and her shoulders slightly bent from decades of labor. "Come here." Now, Maria walked over quietly, her worn shoes making no sound on the marble floor. She kept her eyes low, her face calm, showing no emotion. She had learned long ago that showing feelings in front of people like Victor only made things worse. "Clean this mess," Victor commanded, pointing at the tiny stain like it was a crime scene. "And be quick about it. I don't want to see your face ruining my evening." The businessmen around him chuckled, some of them looking away uncomfortably, but none of them said a word. Maria knelt down slowly, her knees aching as they touched the cold floor. She began wiping the stain with her cloth, her movements calm and practiced. But Victor wasn't done. "You know," he said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear, "this is exactly what's wrong with this country. People like her. No ambition, no education, no value. Just maids. That's all they'll ever be. Just maids." He said those last two words slowly, letting them hang in the air like poison. A few people gasped quietly. Some looked at Maria with pity, but most just stayed silent. Maria's hand paused for just a second. Her jaw tightened, but then she continued cleaning, her face revealing nothing. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. What Victor Ashford didn't know, what no one in that glittering room knew, was that the woman kneeling on that cold floor was about to change his life forever. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, and a spotlight hit the main stage. The host for the evening, a well-known television presenter named Daniel Cross, walked up to the microphone with a wide smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the speakers, "welcome to the highlight of tonight's event. As you know, the Business Excellence Award is given to someone who has shown extraordinary achievement, innovation, and contribution to society. But this year, we're doing something different." A murmur spread through the crowd. Victor Ashford straightened his tie, a confident smile on his face. He had been told weeks ago that he was a top nominee. In fact, he was certain he would win. After all, his company had made record profits this year, and he had donated a large sum to the mayor's charity, a move that had gotten him plenty of good press. "This year," Daniel continued, "we are honoring not just business success, but the human spirit, the strength to rise, the courage to overcome, and the heart to give back without seeking fame or recognition." Victor's smile faltered slightly. That didn't sound like him at all. "Our winner tonight started with nothing, grew up in a one-room house with no running water, worked 3 jobs to put herself through school while raising 2 children alone after her husband passed away. She built a business from scratch, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. A business that now employs over 5,000 people, provides free education to underprivileged children, and has donated more than $200 million to hospitals. orphanages, and disaster relief, all anonymously. Until tonight, the crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Victor looked around, confused. Who was this person? He had never heard of any such businesswoman. She never wanted fame, Daniel said, his voice softening. She never wanted awards. She wanted only to help others the way no one helped her when she was struggling. But tonight, we honor her. Tonight, we reveal her identity to the world. He paused, letting the suspense build. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this year's Business Excellence Award, and the secret founder of the Sunrise Foundation and Evergreen Industries, is someone already in this room. The spotlight began to move, slowly scanning across the crowd. Victor's heart raced. Who could it possibly be? The light swept past the tables of billionaires, past the celebrities, past the politicians, and then it stopped on the woman in the gray cleaning uniform, still kneeling on the floor with a cloth in her hand. Maria. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The entire ballroom went completely silent. Every eye turned toward Maria, the maid that Victor had just humiliated in front of hundreds of people. Maria slowly stood up, her old knees cracking softly. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked up at the spotlight, her brown eyes calm and steady. There was no shock on her face, no surprise, only quiet dignity. That's impossible, Victor whispered, his face turning pale. She's just a cleaning woman. But Daniel Cross was already walking down from the stage, a velvet box in his hands containing the Golden Award. He approached Maria with a deep bow of respect. Miss Maria Delgado, he said warmly, it is the greatest honor of my career to present this award to you. Maria smiled softly, a smile that transformed her entire face. In that moment, she didn't look like a tired old maid. She looked like a queen. Thank you, Daniel, she said, her voice gentle but strong. But I think there are some people here who are very confused. Perhaps I should explain. She took the microphone that Daniel offered her and turned to face the crowd. The room was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. My name is Maria Delgado, she began. 55 years ago, I was born in a village so poor that we didn't have electricity until I was 12. My father died when I was 7. My mother worked in rice fields until her back gave out. I started working at age 10, washing dishes, cleaning houses, scrubbing floors. Just like tonight. She paused, letting her words sink in. When I was 20, I came to this city with nothing but a small bag and a big dream. I worked as a maid for 15 years, saving every penny. I studied at night, slept 3 hours a day, and never stopped believing that hard work would open doors. When I was 35, I started a small business selling handmade soaps from my kitchen. That business grew, and grew, and grew. Today, Evergreen Industries is worth over $4 billion. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Victor Ashford's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. But he didn't even notice. His face was white as a ghost. But I never wanted anyone to know, Maria continued. I kept working as a maid in different places, in different hotels, to remind myself where I came from, to stay humble, to understand the struggles of ordinary people. And tonight, she turned and looked directly at Victor Ashford, her eyes piercing through him like a laser. Tonight, I learned that some lessons still need to be taught. The spotlight shifted to include Victor in its harsh glare. He stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Every person in the room was staring at him now. The man who had just called a secret billionaire a maid. The man who had forced her to kneel and clean a stain while he mocked her in front of everyone. Mr. Ashford, Maria said calmly, walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps, you called me worthless. You said I had no ambition, no education, no value. You said I would never be anything more than a maid. She stopped just a few feet away from him, close enough that he could see the fire burning quietly in her eyes. Do you still believe that? Victor's face was covered in sweat. His hands were trembling. For the first time in his life, he had no clever words, no witty comeback, no army of lawyers to protect him. He was exposed, naked, powerless. I didn't know ... double quotes he stammered. If I had known who you were, I never would have. That's exactly the problem, Maria interrupted, her voice rising just slightly. You think respect should only be given to people with money and titles. You think a person's worth is measured by their clothes, their job, their bank account. But let me tell you something, Mr. Ashford. She stepped even closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper that somehow echoed through the entire silent ballroom. I have cleaned toilets. I have scrubbed floors on my hands and knees. I have been spat on, cursed at, and treated like garbage by people like you. And every single time, I held my head high, because my dignity doesn't come from what I own, it comes from who I am. The crowd began to murmur, some people nodding, others wiping tears from their eyes. But Maria wasn't finished. You asked me to clean a stain from the floor, she said, and I did it. Not because I had to, but because there is no shame in honest work. The only shame is in looking down on those who do it. She reached into the pocket of her gray uniform and pulled out a small photograph, worn and faded from years of being carried close to her heart. She held it up for Victor to see. Do you recognize this woman? Victor squinted at the photo, and his face went from white to green. His knees buckled, and he grabbed a nearby table for support. That's my mother, he whispered. The photo showed a young woman in a maid's uniform, standing in front of a large mansion, smiling hopefully at the camera. Yes, Maria said softly. Your mother, Elena Ashford. She worked as a maid in my grandmother's house 60 years ago. She was poor, she was struggling, and my grandmother, who had nothing herself, gave her a loan to start a small business. A business that eventually became the foundation of your family's empire. The revelation hit Victor like a freight train. He staggered backward, nearly falling over a chair. The businessman, who had been laughing at his jokes minutes ago, now stepped away from him, as if his shame was contagious. No, Victor muttered, shaking his head. No, that can't be true. My father built everything from scratch. He always said. Your father said many things, Maria replied calmly. But the truth is different. I have the original loan documents. I have letters your mother wrote to my grandmother, thanking her for believing in her when no one else did. Your entire fortune, every building you own, every dollar in your account, started with a poor cleaning woman's kindness. She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. My grandmother never asked to be repaid. She never told anyone about the loan. She died believing that helping others was its own reward. But I found those letters when I was cleaning out her house after she passed. And I kept them. I kept them because they reminded me that kindness can change the world, and that the people who look down on the poor often forget where they came from. The crowd was absolutely stunned. Journalists in the room were furiously taking notes, their phones recording every word. This was the story of the century. Victor's public image, his legacy, his pride, all of it crumbling in real time. I didn't come here tonight to humiliate you, Mr. Ashford, Maria said, her voice softening just a little. I came here to remind you, and everyone in this room, that we are all connected. The maid who cleans your hotel room might be the grandmother of the doctor who saves your life one day. The janitor at your office might be raising the child who invents the cure for cancer. We never know who people really are or what they're capable of. So, we must treat everyone with respect. Everyone. She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as she could. CEOs, celebrities, politicians. They all looked away, unable to meet her gaze, because in their hearts, they knew they had been guilty of the same sin as Victor. They had all judged people by their appearance, their job, their social status. They had all ignored the humanity in the people who served them. I have spent my life building something meaningful, Maria continued. Not buildings or bank accounts, but hope. Every orphan who gets an education through my foundation, every sick child who gets free treatment at my hospitals, every family that gets back on their feet after a disaster, that is my legacy. And it all started because a poor cleaning woman showed kindness to another poor cleaning woman 60 years ago. Victor Ashford was a broken man. His shoulders slumped, his head hung low, and actual tears, began streaming down his face. In 58 years, he had never cried in public. He had never shown weakness. He had built walls around his heart so high that he had forgotten what it felt like to be human. But now, those walls were crumbling. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." He fell to his knees, the same cold marble floor where Maria had knelt just minutes ago. The billionaire who had mocked a maid was now kneeling before her, broken and ashamed. "All my life," Victor said, his voice trembling, "I was taught that success meant being better than others, richer, more powerful. I forgot that my own mother was once where you were. I forgot that she struggled, that she suffered, that she was helped by someone with nothing." Maria looked down at him, and her expression changed. The fire in her eyes softened into something warmer, something like compassion. Because Maria had not come here for revenge. She had come here for redemption, not her own, but his. "Stand up, Mr. Ashford," she said gently. Victor looked up at her, his eyes red and wet. "I don't deserve to stand," he said. "I deserve to stay on this floor for the rest of my life." "No," Maria said, reaching down and offering him her hand, the same hand that had been scrubbing the floor. "You deserve a second chance. We all do. That's what makes us human." The crowd watched in stunned silence as Victor Ashford, one of the most powerful men in the country, took the hand of a woman he had called just a maid and slowly rose to his feet. He stood before her, humbled, transformed, like a man who had just woken up from a lifelong nightmare. "I want to make this right," he said, his voice stronger now. "I don't know how, but I want to try. I want to be the man my mother hoped I would be. I want to honor her memory, and honor you." Maria smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Then start tomorrow," she said. "Visit my foundation. Meet the children we help, the families we support. See the world through different eyes. And then decide what kind of legacy you want to leave behind." 6 months passed, and in those 6 months, Victor Ashford became a different man. True to his word, he visited Maria's Sunrise Foundation the very next day. He walked through orphanages where children who had lost everything smiled and laughed and dreamed of becoming doctors and teachers. He visited hospitals where families cried with gratitude because their loved ones received treatment they could never have afforded. He sat in classrooms where teenagers from the poorest neighborhoods studied with the same books and computers as the richest kids in the country. And slowly, something inside Victor began to change. He started spending less time in boardrooms and more time in shelters. He traded his $1,000 suits for simple clothes and worked alongside volunteers serving food to the homeless. He donated half his fortune, not for tax benefits or good press, but because he finally understood that money meant nothing if it didn't help others. He reached out to every maid, janitor, and worker in his companies, personally apologizing for years of indifference and promising to do better. He raised their wages, improved their working conditions, and created scholarships for their children. The newspapers called it the Ashford Transformation. Business experts said he had lost his mind. But Victor knew the truth. He had finally found his soul. Maria became his mentor and his friend. They met every week, sometimes to discuss business, sometimes just to talk about life. She taught him that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched and the hearts you healed. "You know," Victor told her one evening as they sat in a small community center surrounded by laughing children, "I used to think that night was the worst moment of my life. Being humiliated in front of everyone, falling to my knees. But now I realize ... double quotes." He paused, his eyes glistening. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved me, Maria. You saved me from becoming a monster who died alone, surrounded by money but no love." Maria patted his hand gently. "You saved yourself," she said. "I just showed you the mirror, the courage to change, that came from inside you." 1 year later, the Royal Diamond Hotel hosted another grand event. But this time, it wasn't a business awards ceremony. It was the grand opening of the Ashford Delgado Center for Hope, a massive complex that included a free hospital, an orphanage, a school, and a job training center, all built to help those who had nothing. Victor and Maria stood together on the stage, cutting the ribbon as thousands of people cheered. Among them were former maids, janitors, homeless families, and orphan children whose lives were about to change forever. But there was one special guest in the front row, a young woman named Sophia, who had once been an orphan at Maria's foundation. Today, she was a doctor, wearing a white coat and a smile that could light up the world. None of this would exist, Victor said into the microphone, his voice filled with emotion, without the woman standing beside me. A woman I once called just a maid, a woman I tried to humiliate and dismiss, a woman who showed me more grace, more dignity, and more humanity than I had shown anyone in my entire life. He turned to Maria, and in front of everyone, he bowed deeply, the same bow that the host had given her a year ago, but this time filled with genuine love and respect. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for teaching me what it truly means to be rich. Maria stepped forward to speak, and the crowd fell silent. When I was a little girl, she said, my mother told me something I never forgot. She said, Maria, the world will try to tell you that you're small, that you're nothing, that you don't matter. But remember, a single candle can light 1,000 others without losing its own flame. Be that candle. She looked out at the sea of faces before her, rich and poor, young and old, from every background and every walk of life. Today, we light 1,000 candles, and tomorrow, those candles will light 1,000 more. That is our legacy. Not buildings, not money, but the light we leave behind in the hearts of others. The crowd erupted in applause, tears streaming down countless faces, and somewhere in that crowd, a young boy who had been told his whole life that he would never amount to anything looked up at the stage and thought, if she can do it, so can I, because that's the thing about hope. It doesn't ask where you come from, it only asks where you're willing to go. And on that day, in that moment, 1,000 new dreams were born. The moral of the story: never judge anyone by their appearance or their job. The person you look down on today might be the one who lifts you up tomorrow. True wealth is not in your wallet, it's in your character, your kindness, and the legacy of love you leave behind.